2 hours into a shift that could run another 10, a conductor feels the same familiar pressure everyone eventually recognizes, the kind that used to mean pulling into the next gas station. Out the window, there is nothing but track, mile after mile of it, stretching toward a horizon with no exit ramp and no shoulder to pull onto, even if there were. The train behind the cab is pulling 2 miles of freight cars worth more than most small companies. And yet somewhere on this entire 2-mile machine, there is exactly one place to go. Not a car full of facilities, not several scattered along the length of it. One small door, and only one, hidden somewhere on a machine that never stops long enough to make finding it feel urgent. So how does a crew handle something this basic on a machine built to keep moving? Let's get into it right here on Small Things. One door, no alternatives. That single facility sits inside a compact compartment built into the short hood at the front of the locomotive, the section railroaders call the nose, positioned just ahead of the main cab where the crew actually works. It is small, often not much larger than an airplane lavatory, reachable by stepping down from the operating console without ever leaving the cab or stepping onto open track while the train is moving. Inside is a toilet, a small sink, and little else. There is no window looking out at the passing country, no second stall for a partner needing it at the same time. For 2 people sharing a 12-hour shift, this one door is the entire bathroom the train has to offer. A century of silence. It did not begin with an engineering decision. It began with a decade of complaints nobody in power was actually required to act on. For most of the 20th century, federal locomotive safety rules covered almost everything about a train's operation, wheel composition, brake performance, structural strength, but said nothing at all about whether the crew inside had anywhere sanitary to relieve themselves during a shift. Some locomotives carried a basic toilet added at a railroad's own discretion, whatever a given carrier felt like providing. Others carried nothing at all, leaving crews to rely on whatever informal arrangement a particular carrier happened to tolerate that year. That silence finally became impossible to ignore in 1992, when Congress passed the Rail Safety Enforcement and Review Act, responding to years of pressure from railroad labor unions and a National Transportation Safety Board that had raised concerns about working conditions inside locomotive cabs. Buried inside that law was a direct instruction to the Federal Railroad Administration, study whether cab conditions, sanitation included, were actually affecting crew health and safe operation. The agency spent much of the following decade doing exactly that, inspecting locomotives across the country in both ordinary and extreme conditions. What investigators found was worse than a bureaucratic footnote. Of 234 locomotives surveyed, roughly 30% had some kind of sanitation deficiency serious enough to note: missing toilet seats, broken ventilation, waste systems that froze solid in winter weather, compartments a carrier had simply stopped maintaining altogether. The problem was rarely the equipment itself failing on its own. It was neglect, uneven servicing standards that varied wildly from one railroad to the next, with nothing federal holding any of them to a common floor. The Federal Railroad Administration published its final rule on April 4, 2002, taking effect 2 months later. that June. Every lead locomotive in road service would now require an enclosed sanitation compartment, ventilated, equipped with a working toilet, and a door that actually locked from the inside. It was, by any measure, a genuinely modest requirement. It had also taken over a century of American railroading and one act of Congress to become federal law in the first place. That baseline has held ever since. The minimum floor every crew boarding a lead locomotive today can still count on finding behind that one door. Why the train can't simply pull over? So why can a train like this not simply pull over the way almost anything else on wheels can? Start with the weight already in motion. A loaded freight train can easily exceed 10,000 tons, and slowing that much mass down safely, even in a full emergency application, typically takes more than a mile of track. On a train stretching a mile or more itself, the brake signal has to travel physically down the length of the consist car by car, meaning cars near the rear do not even begin braking until several seconds after the ones up front already have. None of that happens instantly, and none of it happens for something as small as a bathroom break. Suppose the train did stop anyway. It would now be sitting on a main line built for trains to move through, not park on, occupying track that dispatchers elsewhere are actively planning around, and very likely straddling a public grade crossing that traffic now has to wait behind. Getting moving again is its own separate problem. The air brake system that held the train in place has to fully recharge before it can safely release, a process that can take the better part of an hour on a long consist. That leaves the question of why the facility can't simply live somewhere farther back, in one of the freight cars themselves, instead of the locomotive. The answer is that those cars were never built to hold a person at all. A sealed steel boxcar or hopper has no electrical wiring, no water line, no climate control, nothing but cargo and the structure holding it. Even if a toilet could physically fit inside one, general operating rules do not allow a crew member to leave the cab and walk back along a moving train to reach it. The only space on the entire consist, already wired, heated, and staffed, is the cab itself, which is exactly why the facility ended up bolted into the compartment right next to it instead of anywhere else on the train. Not a backup, the only option. It would be easy to assume that with no bathroom in sight for miles, crews simply learn to hold it, or that some informal workaround exists that makes the single facility more of a backup than a genuine necessity. That is not really how it works in practice, and it hasn't been for most of a career spent doing this work. For a shift that can legally run close to 12 hours, that one compartment is not a backup option sitting in reserve. For most of the run, it is the only option there actually is. Not every locomotive offers exactly the same experience behind that door, and it would be a mistake to assume otherwise. Newer road locomotives tend to ship with better ventilation and more reliable systems than units built decades earlier, and because a typical locomotive stays in active service for 30 to 40 years, an older unit with a worn compartment can end up leading the exact same train as a newer one the following week. Genuine failures do happen, and when they do, railroads are required to arrange access to an alternative facility, usually back at a yard office or a designated crew change point, rather than anywhere along the open route itself. But that fallback depends entirely on being near one of those points. On a long stretch of remote track, far from any terminal, A crew's only real option is still the door a few steps from the console, working or not. People who live around one door. Midway through an overnight run, a conductor steps down into the nose compartment for less than a minute, checks the door's modesty lock out of old habit before she even really needs to, and is back in her seat before the next signal comes into view down the line. The entire routine so practiced by now that it barely registers as an interruption to either her or the engineer sitting beside her. An engineer beginning a long-haul shift quietly skips his usual second cup of coffee before boarding, a small, private adjustment he started making years ago after one uncomfortable run taught him to plan around the 12 hours ahead rather than simply hope for the best once he was already committed to them and couldn't step off. It isn't a dramatic sacrifice, just a habit built quietly over a long career, the kind veteran crews rarely mention out loud, but almost all of them share in some version. At a rail yard before dawn, a service worker restocks toilet paper, refills the washing system, and runs a quick inspection on a locomotive's sanitation compartment before it heads out again for another run, a 5-minute task performed without much thought or ceremony that ends up determining, more than almost anything else about the machine, how bearable the next 12 hours will actually feel for whoever ends up sitting in that cab once the yard is far behind them. Room for an ordinary body. Everything about a modern freight train is built around one idea: keep the mass moving, because stopping it costs time, fuel, and track capacity that ripples out across an entire network far beyond that one train. But inside that same machine, two people still need water, rest, and somewhere private to go, needs that have never once cared how efficient the railroad needed to be that day. The door in the locomotive's nose is not a footnote to that efficiency. It is the place where an enormous, uninterruptible system finally had to make room for an ordinary human body. If this changed the way you look at a freight train rolling past, let us know in the comments what you want us to explore next. We might make it our next episode. Thanks for watching. History often hides in the smallest details.